And welcome to another exciting episode of The Energy That Surrounds Us, Season 2. I am joined tonight by a guest who I'm sure most of you have heard of, and those of you who haven't, you're in for a huge treat. I have with me tonight Mike Ricksecker.
Thanks for joining our thanks for joining me. Thanks for having me tonight, Michael. Sorry, I have my own show on Wednesday night, so I'm kind of used to, hey, thanks for joining us. Thank you for having me, Michael.
No problem. That's the fun of live shows.
Yeah, absolutely.
So for those of who are just seeing you and hearing about you for the first time, can you give a little bit of your history?
Yeah. For the first time, that breaks my heart, but yeah, I've been involved with paranormal, supernatural, esoteric topics, what have you, for upward somewhere around 30 years, something like that, some way, shape, or form. Primarily an author, researcher, a filmmaker as well. Been on a number of the different television shows like Ancient Aliens, Unexplained with William Shatner, The Alaska Triangle, Gaia TV, a lot of those different ones. And I go around and do events, speaking engagements. We have a tour coming up in Egypt. So I have my hands in a lot of different things.
So what's your favorite show that you see on TV and you're like, oh man, how do I get on that one?
That's a tough question to answer because there's some good ones. I really like The Curse of Oak Island. Unless I stumble across something in my research that would connect what I'm doing back to that, I don't see me getting on there. But I've been following that one for a long time. Some of the newer ones that are in a similar type of vein, like Skinwalker Ranch, Blind Frog Ranch, those are very cool and interesting with some of the, there's a lot of mystery involved. We're using science to try to figure things out. And there's some of that, supernatural element to it as well. So those are really, really cool. And, but I've been on some shows that I really enjoy. I mean, Ancient Aliens is something that I've been watching for years and years and years. And it was a real honor when, they emailed me one day and asked if I might be interested in partaking in an episode. And now it's, I filmed 3 more episodes last year. I filmed more episodes for the season that just started. So you'll see me on there again. So that's, one that I really wanted to get on, and it ended up happening. So I've been really, really fortunate.
That's really cool. And I actually grew up knowing William Henry, and so
that's okay.
Cool that you're on that show with him.
Yeah. Met him a couple of times, ran into him one time. First time I met him was actually that first episode that I filmed with Ancient Aliens, and it was at the Pasadena Museum of History. He was walking out from having just filmed. I was walking in, and we chatted for we chatted for a brief moment. So that was cool. The first time I got to meet him and talk with him briefly since then as well. So yeah, great guy.
That's really cool. And you bring up the supernatural aspect, which I think is a good leadway into one of the topics we were talking about backstage, and that's the now, can you say, infamous Alaska Triangle?
Yeah, that's gained some popularity here, and it's interesting because when I talk to people about it, a lot of people are like, I didn't know Alaska had a triangle as well. And because everybody knows the Bermuda Triangle, that's the famous one, and really, it was a term that was given it back in going back to the 50s and early 60s. But there were events that were happening in the Bermuda Triangle. We can trace it as far back as Christopher Columbus. Actually, he had reported strange things there when he first sailed there in 1492. But there are other triangle areas around the world that have been around even longer, at least have been recognized even longer, even though they may not have been called a triangle area. Like in Japan, we have what we call now the Dragon's Triangle, but for millennia, it was called the Dragon Sea because all the shipwrecks that would happen there, strange activity, crazy weather phenomena, all of that. And once it became, 20th century and, that's the Bermuda Triangle, then we're going to call that one a triangle. Same thing with Alaska, where, we're now calling that a triangle. And it's a really huge, wide area that we're talking about, Juneau to Anchorage up to Reykjavik, which used to be known as Barrow, for those that are not familiar. So it's roughly the size of California. So it's a really, really big area that we're calling a triangle. But yeah, we have sure paranormal supernatural activity that occurs there, all kinds of strange missing person cases, missing airplanes, of course shipwrecks and ghost ships, shadow activity, UFO sightings, cryptid sightings, Sasquatch, all of that stuff up there. So it's fascinating, the research that's come out of there. And of course, we had the television show there a couple seasons, the Alaska Triangle.
So I'm curious, what, in your opinion, makes like a supernatural area be classified as a triangle? What do you look for to say, okay, these, yes, you are in a triangle?
Yeah, I mean, really, we're looking for an increased amount of strange activity, and we're picking three rough areas on the map. Really, is what's occurring here. It's not a perfect triangle in which the phenomena occurs. It's really, I guess, globular in nature. You would say it extends out from those boundaries, so it's not just a perfect triangle that everything occurs in, but you're finding an area of the world that strange things happen. And what are roughly 3 points on it? We got the triangle idea from Bermuda because when that phenomena was occurring, and you can see some of the old newspaper articles in which they're mapping out the strange things that happened. And one of the scribes back in the day noticed, well, wait a minute, it kind of looks like a bit of a triangle on this particular map. And so they kind of roughed it out between Bermuda, Miami area down to about the San Juan area. But again, it's not perfect because things happen outside of that as well. But we're talking about hotspot areas of the Earth in which you have a higher degree of electromagnetism. When it comes to the Alaska Triangle, back in the 1960s, U.S. Department of the Interior did a survey up there, electromagnetic survey of the area, and from that, and it was roughly about 100,000 square miles. Now, Alaska's over 600,000 square miles. It's a huge state, about 2.5 times the size of Texas. People don't really realize how big it is because they just see it usually in the corner of some map, but really it's massive. And when they did this survey, they detected, they classified 5 different magnetic characters, and they detected within those characters negative anomalies. So they had already deduced that this was a highly electromagnetic area. And that's really stemming from the Earth's core, which is, of course, it's molten iron, and it's spinning and spinning and spinning like the Earth does. And as molten metal spins, it creates a magnetic field that emanates out from the Earth, which is a good thing because that protects us from the solar wind and solar flares. And without our magnetic shield, we'd get fried. So it's a good thing that happens. But as it passes through different the different layers of the earth, like the mantle and the crust and what have you. It interacts with different metals and minerals, and depending on the type of metal and minerals and how big the deposits are and things like that, it has a different electromagnetic reaction, can create these more magnified type fields. And that's what's happening in an area like the Alaska Triangle. And what makes that one a little bit more special up there is not only do you have that coming out of the earth, but you also have a lot of seismic activity up there. There's a lot of earthquakes. You have volcanic activity. There are many volcanoes that are up there. When I stepped off the plane in November 1992 when I got stationed up there, there's still ash falling from the sky from a recent volcano eruption. And then, of course, you have the aforementioned solar flares and solar wind as that's beating against the magnetic shield up there. It's a little bit thinner up there in that area of the Earth, and so that's where we get those beautiful, magnificent auroras. And so it's really this fantastic cocktail of different energies up there that's creating a lot of this activity.
Wow, and it's interesting that you say volcanic because even I've been to Alaska on the south edge on a cruise ship, mind you, but looking at all the ice and snow around, you would not think, oh, this is a volcanic area like Hawaii.
Yeah, it's volcanoes. Yeah, they happen in all different places. There, Iceland has a lot of volcanoes. That's a pretty chilly area. Yeah, it's the Aleutian Islands. There's some of the most active volcanoes that are around that area. Now, when I was up there in '92, it was Mount Spur that had erupted, which was really right across the Cook Inlet from Anchorage. But the Aleutian Islands have a lot of really active volcanoes. And just recently here, a few years ago, scientists had done a better survey of that area, and they have detected a massive ancient caldera right under the ocean in that area. So we're talking about ancient supervolcano that had been up there.
So you think because it's under the ocean that one may be dormant now and everything's okay, or you think that's just an illusion and that thing could go anytime?
Yeah, you never know, because the volcanoes that are there really, they kind of outline the rim of that ancient caldera. So there's still activity in that area. And if when you look at other areas of the world, like the ancient supervolcano that is right smack dab in the middle of the United States, well, we're still seeing some effects of that, like those fantastic geysers at Yellowstone. They're still heated by that magma underground, that's in that massive supervolcano. Now, sure, it's dormant. It's been dormant for a long, 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 long time. We're talking millions of years. Same with that one in Alaska. But there are still connections back to basically the interior of the Earth. So if things shift around in the right way, depending on kind of earthquake over here, earthquake over there, the tectonic plates of the planet are always shifting a little bit. So you never know what might get things started at some point.
I'm also curious because, as you pointed out, the TV show there talked about the potential of a Stargate in a mountain in the Alaska Triangle. And I'm wondering, because of the volcanic around, how it's messing with the magnetics, because I'm sure it has an effect on it. Do you think that's why there may be alien bases there and that they're able to cloak because of the ice and everything?
Well, you're talking about an area that's very, very sparsely populated, like one of the popular mountains that are said to have or house extraterrestrials that are working with the military is Mount Hayes. But the thing is there's no road to Mount Hayes. You can't drive up to it. You have to basically fly there and get a local pilot to take you up there, that sort of thing, which we did on the show. James Fox, a very prominent UFO researcher, did that. They flew him up there. And they didn't find anything there. They landed on a small glacier, looked around, and but that came into view back during the 1970s with remote viewer Pat Price. And this is a guy that was very, very talented at remote viewing. The government, the CIA, and other entities had used his remote viewing abilities for a number of different things. And he died mysteriously one day in Las Vegas, and his body was cremated before his wife could even get there to claim the body. So they're really, really bizarre circumstances. But he had tuned into Mount Hazen and a few other areas around the world that he had detected this type of activity going on there. So there's that, and there's also the idea of the Black Pyramid under Mount Denali that is said to also, of course, have some extraterrestrial activity there as well. And this pyramid, and really, we have anecdotal stories that have filtered down to us about that. We'd love to get some empirical proof, but basically this pyramid they call it the Black Pyramid because that's the color of it, and it's supposed to be larger than the Great Pyramid of Giza. And some people believe it was some sort of power plant, not just for that region up there, but also extended out into Canada, which would be pretty significant.
Right. And it's interesting because, I'm recalling the show, and a lot of the show was a lot of anecdotal legends and everything around. And so, how do you determine, like, if you were to go back on your own to say, okay, this person's anecdotal story seems a little more credible than this person's? Because we all know from the game Telephone that stories are altered. So how do you determine whose is closer to the truth?
Yeah, that's kind of the challenge. It comes down to a lot of these cases because something happened to somebody out in the woods. Like maybe they saw Bigfoot or Sasquatch or something like that, and a lot of times the moment happens so quick that you don't even think to grab your cell phone and snap a photo or whatever. And I've been in those situations. I've been in a situation before where 5 of us saw the apparition of a little girl right in the middle of the hallway, manifested out of black smoke. And there she. None of us thought to grab a cell phone real quick or a camera and get a photo because we're all like busy coaxing her to come closer to us. So the moment really kind of passes us by. And all of a sudden, oh, I should have gotten a photo of that. So then all you have left is a story. And so a lot of times it comes down to, how much do I trust this person? How much do I believe this person is this a credible person? And then of course you go to the area and you look around and you see what the conditions are. You see if there might be any evidence left over, that sort of thing, to see if it really happened. But some of these things, like the Japanese Airlines flight in 1986. I mean, there was a lot of evidence from that. You had all of the tapes from the chatter between Captain Teriyuchi, the Anchorage Air Traffic Control, and then the Air Force up there, all going back and forth about what was on radar and what Teriyuchi was seeing up there in the air. They even got a United Airlines plane involved to try to figure out what was going on. So you had some significant audio and radar evidence there. So it's those things like that you kind of you're holding on to. Okay, this is our evidence that there is something that's really, really going on up there.
So what was the catalyst for you to sit there and say, hey, I need to go investigate this triangle up in Alaska and write a book? And
yeah, it's interesting the way life works. Because I was stationed in Alaska in the United States Air Force from 1992 to 1995. I was not up there to do any of that type of research. Yes, I did have an interest in the paranormal, supernatural, that sort of thing. But we're talking in an era where we didn't have the ghost shows. There weren't, Ancient Aliens wasn't a thing. None of that really existed. You had In Search of with Leonard Nimoy, which had already, its run had already long since been done by that point in time. And around the nation, there were maybe a handful of local ghost hunting groups. You had Hans Holzer's books. There wasn't really a lot, right? So it was really whatever you might be able to get your hands on to really research those type of topics.
Right.
So, so when I was up there in Alaska, it was like, I mean, I was there to do a job for one. I was young. I got married way too soon while I was up there. So, got married, started a family, all that sort of thing. So even though things did happen and, I kept my eyes open, that sort of thing, it wasn't my purpose up there. I got more involved and deeper into all of that sort of, like, more active in the mid 2000s. I had my first book came out, and then I was basically asked by my second publisher if I would do some different paranormal books, that sort of thing, where I really, really started getting more involved. And so over the years, as I started doing more of this research, putting books out there, started the YouTube channel more than 10 years ago now. And I started putting a lot more of this content out there, doing speaking engagements, that sort of thing. Even ended up on a couple of television shows early on. That I did a video on portals, the relationship between paranormal activity, supernatural activity, and portal activity. I put that on my YouTube channel, and it was actually a really, really low view count. It was it underperformed. It was not a very good performing video at all. But yet, the producers for the Alaska Triangle had contacted me, and I had no idea what show they were doing or anything like that. They said, "We came across your video on YouTube. You speak really well. We see that you have all these books. We want to talk to you about this type of activity." Okay. So get on the horn with Mike Parks and a couple other guys at Wild Dream Entertainment, and we were just chatting about portal activity, how it works, the relationship between supernatural activity, ley lines, all that sort of stuff, earth energy, and what have you. And then all of a sudden they ask me, "Well, what do you know about this sort of thing happening in Alaska?" And I was like, "Well, I was stationed up there for 3 years, and there's a lot of that sort of activity, and they have up there what they call the Alaska Triangle." And they said, "That's the name of our television show." So, boom, we signed the deal. They brought me up there. We talked about all kinds of different topics and what have you. And so it was really the show reaching out to me, and the fact that I had already had a connection back to Alaska, that it was like that part of my life found me again. And so that inspired me after the show to go ahead and do some deeper research and write the book, which is really the opposite of the way that sort of thing happens. Usually you write the book first, and they contact you because you wrote the book, and they want to interview you about the different subject matter of that book for their television show. But for me, it was the opposite. They had contacted me about something else, brought me on the television show. The television show inspired me to further research it out and write the book.
No, that's actually really cool, though, that it did that, because that puts a whole new perspective on it, possibly, than if he had written it first and been like, "Oh, you may have been more analytical instead of more experiential, maybe," and thinking, "Oh, so it's maybe, was divinely written to do the show first and the book second."
What I was able to do with it, because we did the show first, was that it serves as a nice compendium for the show, because I talk about a number of the different cases that we covered on the show, and provides more information. So if you are familiar with the Alaska Triangle television show and want some more information about some of those different cases, then this is a great book to pick up, because I cover those things and you get more in-depth information about that, as well as other events, stories, and strange things that happened up there, as well as to me. And then there's the forward is done by Johnny Enoch, who's another one of the cast members on the show, esoteric researcher. There's a nice photo of myself and Johnny and Jeremy Ray, the one of the MUFON guys that was on the show as well, when we did an event together. So so there's a lot of nice little tidbits from the television show that are included in the book, but you get a lot more with it too.
That's cool. And I'm curious too, with you being in the service, did you have like an experience that stands out in your mind and going, because I'm in the service, I cannot talk about this, but man, I really wish I could because people need to know about this?
Well, yeah, there's that. Not necessarily, not in Alaska though. I spent 3 years in Alaska and then 3 years at Fort George G. Meade in Maryland, which is the home of NSA. And yes, I did spend time at NSA, and there are certainly things that I saw there that I cannot talk about. But yeah, it would probably be good if the American public knew, and I'm not at liberty to talk about those things. But
No, I don't want you to break
yeah, no, I can't do that. But when I was in Alaska, there, and I talk about this in the book, but it was something we couldn't really talk outside of the office about, because it dealt with shadow entities that were 2 to 3 years that I was there spent in at the Alaska Command Building. I worked for it. It started as what we called WMICS, Worldwide Military Command Control Systems, and we shifted to GCCS, Global Command Control System. So we were basically the GCCS still exists today. We were the ones that basically launched that, and I was actually the first person to remotely deploy GCCS. Took it down to Fort Polk, Louisiana, while we were doing the exercises, basically war games with, it was a joint assignment with, Army, and we had the Marines. I think Navy was there as well. And to make sure that, that worked, that was one of the goals for that particular exercise. The first year in Alaska, I was waiting for my security clearance to come in. So for those 2 years, our office was in the basement of the Alaska Command Building, and we shared office space with the base communications center. Our task was for routing communications for command around the Pacific Air Forces. And in that facility, especially in the back office area, we routinely saw shadow activity. We might be sitting down and see something. It's basically the back office area was giant cubicle area, and then there were some other like actual physical offices that were back there. And you might be sitting there at your cube, our little area that we had created, and all of a sudden a shadow would go walking by, or you might be walking down the hallway with a buddy, and all of a sudden you'd see something, dart by. You see that? Oh, I saw that. So there were a number of us that saw this down there, but we couldn't really. It's not something you take up the chain, right? You're not telling your NCOIC. You're not telling. You're not telling your commander. None of that, because you start talking about seeing shadows or ghosts or anything like that, they're going to send you down to mental health, and then you're going to get your security clearance pulled. So we talked about it amongst ourselves. We just couldn't take it anywhere outside of that. And it was interesting because there was this running story that the reason why we were seeing those shadows down there was that the building had once been a hospital, and where we were set up at was the morgue, and where we had our uh, communications racks, like patch panels, multiplexers, crypto devices, all that sort of stuff. That rack room was supposed to be where they kept the coolers. So and made sense. Okay, yeah. So we're seeing the spirits of the dead that were brought down there. So, of course, I'm going to tell the story in Alaska's Mysterious Triangle. Well, when I'm doing the research for the book, of course, I want to make sure I have all the facts about the building correct. We're talking about it once being a hospital. Okay, let's go and find out, the years that it was used as a hospital, that sort of thing. Let's start doing that research and discover that the building was never a hospital. It was built for exactly what it was being used for at that time and still to this day. And that is command. It's always been a command building. So then, where did the story about this hospital come from? Well, I think it was people trying to make sense of what they were seeing. The building, the way it's constructed, yeah, you could probably say it might look like a hospital from the 40s or 50s. It has a little bit of an Art Deco style to it, I guess. But yeah, I think people were just trying to rationalize what it was they were seeing. What's the thing that makes the most sense? And so that was the story. I think what we were seeing was because you start to have to then ask yourself, okay, what were we seeing if it wasn't spirits of people who had passed? So I believe, and there's no way to go and prove it because I can't get into the building today, unfortunately. But I think we are seeing some sort of time slip, that we are seeing fluctuations in time, and we are seeing personnel from the past. We could even be seeing personnel from the future, or we could have even been seeing ourselves at different moments, and they're just kind of walking about doing their thing. And that's we talk about that type of energy of the Alaska Triangle. You're talking about a more supercharged type area for these type of things to happen, manifestation of a lot of different things, different beings, different entities, being able to access other dimensions, being able to access other points in time. The shadow aspect of it is just the way our eyes take in the light and are trying to make sense of what it is that that energy signature that's there. So yeah, I think it was more of like a time slip that was occurring up there that we were seeing.
I would tend to agree and with that theory because nowhere in your story did you ever say, well, when we saw these, we were feeling threatened, went for our weapons. It was always like, oh, you saw that, okay. And so it's like you get a sense that you weren't feeling threatened by it. So chances are maybe it is seeing yourself going through the motion of the day.
Yeah, and like I said, that could even be ourselves. So there might have been, yeah, I might have seen myself walking down the hall, 3 months in the future, 3 months in the past. It's um, then that's been my most recent area of research is the nature of time and how that really works, and that's book back here on the shelf, Travels Through Time, is the latest that delves deeper into that, and I recount that story again in that book as well, as an example.
So do you feel like, and there are a couple questions in the chat room, but before I get to those, I'm just wanting to kind of ask because I don't always get to talk with someone who's been there or experienced what you have. And so do you feel like the energy there has altered your mindset in any way, that that's why you were able to see and experience, and did it leave any effects on you, or do you feel like, oh, once you left, everything kind of calmed down and you're like, life is normal?
life's never been normal for me. I've been seeing shadow entities since I was about 8 years old. I had a significant incident at that age. Another house that we moved into when I was 13. Routinely saw shadows there for several months that we were there. My mother saw them as well. So it was kind of, just another, I don't want to say just another day, but it wasn't anything I was entirely unfamiliar with at that point. And, later on, as I started doing more with, actually going out and doing paranormal investigations, 10 years after that. And what I was doing when I was a teenager, I had done some investigating, but had no idea that's what it was at the time, because again, we didn't have the ghost shows or anything like that to really have that sort of context. Yeah, I saw all kinds of shadows, and again, while I was actually investigating. So I think a lot of what it is your body will become in tune to different energies. So like when you're on a paranormal investigation, you might see a shadow or an apparition or something like that, and the person next to you doesn't. Hey, you see that over there? No, I don't. And I think that's because my energy. Everybody has a personal resonance. It's actually measurable. There have been scientific researches done that. You can look up the publications, but human body resonates anywhere between about 9 to 16 hertz, and depending on if you're standing, sitting, walking around, whatever, that changes a little bit. It fluctuates a little bit. People kind of settle into different areas, and everybody's a little different. So since we're all a little bit different, if I'm standing next to my buddy, say I'm like around 10 hertz and he's more around 14, and then all of a sudden some other entity walks into the room, whether it's a shadow or a human spirit or whatever it is, interdimensional being, and they're resonating, maybe they're resonating at 11, a little bit closer to me, further away from my buddy. Maybe that's why I get a better glimpse of it than he does. And I think that when certain things come into the room, that your body recognizes it. It recognizes that energy signature, and it'll tune in. So like if I was at 10 and that thing was at 11, that's not too far off from where I am. My body recognized that sort of energy signature, and it kind of ups that resonance and tunes into what it was or what it is.
All right. I was just asking because, like you were saying, everyone down there was experiencing it, and so to me, it seems almost rare that everybody would be seen, because I've been on investigations as well where one may, the other won't, or maybe two will, three won't, and so that's why I was wondering if you felt the energy of where you were opened up to where everybody could see.
Yeah, it's a little bit more rare for a lot of people. And it wasn't everybody, but it was a significant amount of people. I could say that there's probably at least a dozen of us that saw something going on down there. Now you're talking, there's maybe like 50 or 60 people that worked in and out of there. So, but that's still a pretty good percentage of people that saw it. And there may be people that saw it and never said anything, and we just don't know. So, yeah. So it's definitely a good amount. But I think that adheres to, the power of the triangle.
Right. And that brings me to New Light Paranormal as asking, did you find a correlation between alleged hubs of paranormal spirit activity and supernatural activity? Do they both utilize the same energy fields running through the ley lines? It can't be a coincidence that so many ancient sites of worship tend to have these energy lines intersecting.
Well, yeah, it's definitely not a coincidence. So you have to kind of understand what we're talking about with ley line. So ley line is actually the lining up of those ancient sites of power. It's a geographical what do I want to say? So Alfred Watkins in the 1920s, the book's 100 years old now. In the 1920s, wrote a book called The Old Straight Track because he had noticed this, basically walking the English countryside, that all of these different, whether stone circle or a temple or cathedral or whatever, all these different things lined up. So that's the lay, is a geographical lining up of these different sites. But the reason why they lined up is because of the energy currents under the ground. The technical term is called telluric currents. Nobody uses that term except for guys that write books like I do, like myself, Freddie Silva, and some others, where we talk about the telluric currents under the ground. But that's why. The ancients knew to build on top of those energy lines for a number of different purposes. They were tapping in for healing purposes. They were tapping in for enter into altered states of consciousness. They were tapping. Well, and we can speculate on some different things. That they have the technology and the know-how to open up things like portals and what have you. They're definitely performing different rituals at these locations, and when you go to them today, the ones that actually still allow you to walk inside them. Like you go to Stonehenge now, you can't walk inside of it. You can just kind of look at it. Oh, hey, there's Stonehenge. But they're not, letting people up there anymore. But like Drombeg Stone Circle in Ireland, when you walk into the middle of that stone circle, it's a smaller one. Some of the stones are missing. Of course, the stones that are there are weathered down from when it was first built thousands of years ago. But when you stand in the center of that thing, sure, somebody could say they can feel the energy, but just talk. When you talk, you feel that reverberation coming back at you. It's almost like you're in this specialized little bubble just from simply talking. So imagine now, chanting and doing something much more significant like you would during some sort of spiritual ritual. Thousands of years ago, when the stones were in their full glory and all of them were there, oh my gosh, I want to talk about the energy that you'd be able to harness with that thing. Crazy.
I agree, and it's interesting because, like you point out, the stone circles and everything. And I know, like Newgrange in Ireland is not a stone circle, but still, it's like an ancient structure on the ley line.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like a calendar. I believe that they're saying is because it lines up with the equinox.
It's the winter solstice. Yeah. The winter solstice, the sunlight goes all the way into the very back chamber, right down the passageway. They have a lottery for that. If you want to be there when that happens, they actually have a lottery that you submit to, and you get your number pulled, and then you can go. So it's pretty wild.
I would pull for that. So I'm kind of curious as well. Is New Light's other question sort of ties into is I do wonder whether the occupants or operators of UAPs are aware of spiritual entities and whether they have ever crossed paths. And I actually want to tweak that a little bit to some of the stories of the Alaska Triangle where they talk about seeing the Thunderbird and or a pterodactyl. How, do you feel like that may have actually occurred? And, how, is there like anything for them to say, hey, wait a minute, did you just see that dinosaur fly by?
Okay, so we're kind of talking about two different things. So, okay, UFOs, UAPs, being aware of these other beings. Some of them actually are those beings. So when we're talking about UFOs, UAPs, we're not just talking about a physical craft from another planet somewhere else in the universe. I mean, some of them are. Some of these things that we're witnessing are interdimensional in nature, and when we talk about spiritual beings and interdimensional beings, in some ways that they are related, because a spiritual being would be from somewhere else in the beyond, whether that is in another dimension. We have up to 11 hyperspatial dimensions, so that could be fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, on upward, or they could even be outside the whole universe entirely. So you want to call that another dimension or something else. Like, we go down the rabbit hole of simulation theory. The other part when it comes to the Thunderbirds. So here's my thing about Thunderbirds. And I do talk about this in the Alaska Triangle, because there are Thunderbird legends, of course, there in Alaska. There's also a lot of missing airplanes. And so we talked, well, one of the cases that we talked about when it came to missing airplanes was a Douglas Skymaster that went missing in 1950. There's a lot of airplanes that have gone missing in Alaska. But we talked about with this particular one, the fact that it may have actually, when it disappeared, it may have actually passed through some sort of portal to went somewhere else in the cosmos, another dimension, another point in time. We don't know for sure. I'm more inclined to say it went to another point in time. The reason why I say that is, okay, so let's say portal up, and we've, they use Bruce Gernon to tell part of this story, because down in the Bermuda Triangle, he passed through what he called an electronic fog. It swirled up like a tunnel, and all of a sudden he, somehow flew 100 miles in 3 minutes. Well, he didn't really fly 100 miles in 3 minutes. He essentially time traveled. It was very short, but he did time travel. So let's use the example of that to say that maybe the Douglas Skymaster passed through some sort of portal and passed to another point in time. So where did it go then? If it went to another point in time, it could have gone forward, yes. But let's talk about it possibly going backward in time. Like, we'll just throw out an arbitrary number to say 500 years. Well, what would the indigenous people in that area think about, if they were to suddenly see an airplane in the sky? Well, they would have no context whatsoever of an airplane at all. The only thing that they would know of being in the sky would be a bird. Well, here you have a very, large, we know it as a plane, but it has a large wingspan. It's very loud. So is that where the Thunderbird legends are coming from? Is that they had seen something in the sky, like one of our airplanes, and that's what they ended up attributing to the Thunderbird, were these large airplanes that had, traversed through some sort of portal back in time.
Right. And, that raises an interesting question, too, because I'm sure you've read cases where when you see something you've never seen before, your memory of it starts to form into an object that you are familiar with. And so, it could have been a silver metal plane flying overhead, but their mind is like, no concept of that. But they do have a concept of a bird, and so they put feathers to it.
And yeah, exactly. They're gonna talk about it in the context that they are familiar with. Absolutely.
Now, what in your research do you feel like are the requirements for one to open up and travel through time or experience it, or is it something totally random and natural and you just get the luck of the draw?
Well, that kind of does happen sometimes when we start talking about time slips. Sometimes we don't quite understand the catalyst. Well, no, I'll say this: we don't understand what the catalyst of that really is, and we have an experience. One of the more famous ones. Well, people talk about the Versailles time slip. That's probably the most famous. One that I like to talk about is at what we know as the Conjuring House in Harrisville, Rhode Island, where Carolyn Perrin saw an entire family from the 1700s appear before her, and they recognized her, they acknowledged her. So you had the past looking into the future, and the future looking into the past in that moment, and actually being able to have in interaction, which is fascinating. So then the question becomes, how did that happen? Well, for one, we're talking about an area, a piece of land that, sure, you could talk about like there's Native American energy and things like that around there for energy, but it also has the well room right below that parlor where this incident happened. And that well room, and it's called that because there is an open well there with water in there to this day. The walls are made of limestone and they're capped with granite blocks. This is like a perfect little power plant. We see this type of construction. It's much more glamorous out in Egypt, but we see our ancient Egyptian temples that are have those building blocks like that, limestone, granite, water, all that, to be able to harness energy. And so here that is in that house. And so we don't know what made that moment so special that was able to happen, but I believe that well room was certainly helping to power that. But I believe it's okay. I have what I call stacked time theory. We're getting close to the end here, so I don't have a lot of time to be able to delve into it. But essentially, time doesn't exist. It's a human construct. We have created this idea of what time is to describe our reality, to to know when to plant the crops, to keep track of the seasons, to know when to show up at work at the right moment so our supervisor doesn't get upset with us, that sort of thing. But what we're really in, our consciousness, is the fourth dimension. Okay, and that makes us pretty special because it makes us multidimensional beings. So our consciousness in the fourth dimension is inside the three-dimensional body, and we're able to see and interact and touch everything that is below our dimension, all three-dimensional objects that are around us. Well, the same thing with all the other dimensions above us, 5, 6, 7, 8 on upward. They're able to see and interact with time. So it means time is all whole concurrent somewhere. We're kind of trapped in this rule set. Again, don't have a lot of time to go too deep into it. But if all time is concurrent, take where you're sitting right now. And every moment that has happened, is happening, and will happen, we're all there. Every moment like a photograph in a large stack of photos. And every once in a while, there are two of those moments that resonate at the same frequency for just a moment. And one will get a glimpse of one, and one will get a glimpse of the other. And that's what we call a time slip. So that's what Carolyn was experiencing that particular day. The question is, what caused that frequency to resonate, exactly the same? And how can we possibly control that? There's all kinds of different reports and occurrences and stories of people getting these glimpses of the past or even of the future. And if we could harness that, and I think it's going to be more like meditation. It's going to have more to do with the consciousness and meditation than, say, like a DeLorean and a flux capacitor, which is great fun, made for a wonderful movie. But it's going to have more to do with tuning our bodies into a particular moment or a particular time frame to be able to experience it. And so if you've ever seen the movie Somewhere in Time, I think Richard Matheson was really onto something there. And he used in his research a lot of books from that time and even earlier that explored the nature of time and what it really is, to build that story out of how his character, Richard, was able to will his consciousness back into time to be able to experience a couple of days of what the story was.
Right. And I do know the movie you're talking about, and it was an amazing film. And talking about the time slips and everything, real quick, I'm curious your opinion of, I know there are archways in the Mediterranean and in the Far East in some of those temples where they have like dinosaurs etched in. Perfectly, like you can't help but look at it and say, that's a dino.
Yeah.
How did they know?
Yeah, there's a great one in India. Yeah.
Days, what the dino looked like?
Yeah. No, that's a wonderful question. So I think what that tells us is that history is much older than traditional archaeology is willing to admit to. And this has been an argument that's been going on for some decades now. It's like historians and archaeologists got stuck in a rut in some narrative that they just do not want to pull out of. And you have other disciplines and other researchers that are saying, well, wait a minute, no, this doesn't add up. Like back in the early 90s, when a geologist, Robert Schoch, that comes along, he was asked by John Anthony West to take a look at the Sphinx enclosure and give him a geological perspective of that. And Schoch's answer was that, well, given the water weathering pattern that's on the Sphinx enclosure, and it's very, very obvious. Anybody who's ever been in any type of environment where they've seen water runoff can look at that and say, well, yeah, the water did that. It dates the Sphinx back to at least 10 or 12,000 years ago, which flies in the face of traditional archaeology. And of course, you had these archaeologists that are saying no, show me a pot shard or something from that time. And the geologists are like, I don't need to show you a pot shard. I'm looking at the rocks, which is my specialty. This is my livelihood. This is my living. This is what I do. This is my specialization. I'm telling you, that's what this pattern over here is showing me. And the archaeologists don't want to believe it. We're seeing the same thing right now with Gunung Padang out in Indonesia, where you have the geologists saying, look, this, what we are calling a pyramid was constructed by humans. It's human ingenuity here from 25,000 years ago. And the archaeologists say, no. The humans weren't able to do that 25,000 years ago. And even like some of the local archaeologists are like, well, our people, 11,000 years ago weren't doing things like that. And it's like, well, wait a second here. There's a big difference between 25,000 and 11,000 years ago. whatever happened in the middle, things can happen over 14,000 years that, whether there was some sort of, so we could talk about a cataclysm, sure, but there could have been a famine. There could have been just warring factions and a genocide or whatever. The technology can get lost over 14,000 years. Come on. Right. So, but again, it's another one where the geologists are saying, this is what the rocks are telling us, but this is our specialty. This is what we do. And this is what it's telling us. And the traditional archaeologists they don't want to hear it because they have this timeline that they put together. And for whatever reason, they don't feel inspired to break it. I mean, personally, I would be excited, like, oh, there's new information. Let's, that's a new adventure, right? But right. A lot of them don't want to hear it, unfortunately.
No. And before we run out of time, where can people find you or get a hold of you if they have questions?
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me MikeRicksecker.com. That's my main website. You can find links to all my books out there, my event calendar. Sign up for the newsletter. Of course, you have links to the Connected Universe portal from there, which is that's my online community. All kinds of information out there. Check that out. And then, of course, I have my YouTube channel, which is Mike Ricksecker. So, yeah. Plenty of stuff. Check it all out.
Okay, and I linked all that I could find in the description. So if anyone didn't have a chance to write that down, that should be in the description of this episode. And so I want to thank you, Mike, for coming on and speaking with us.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Michael. I appreciate it.
And I'm going to selfishly plug that Mike will be returning this month on Thursday, the 25th.
25th. Okay.
On Riding Through the Unknown. So if you have any other questions or you want to hear more of his stories, you can tune into that channel. That'll be at 8 o'clock Central Time. And thank you to everyone in the chat. Thank you to everyone who's watching. And have a blessed night, day, afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Good night, everyone.